When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. The first time I met Susannah Brade-Waring, hi Susannah.
Hi Mark.
The first time we met and we were getting to know each other, I said, so I noticed in your bio that you were a finance director of a tech company. You must have a finance background. And he went, no, I just taught myself to be a finance director. Then I taught myself to be head of HR and all the other leadership roles. So self-made leader, I see you as, Susannah, which we're definitely going to talk about. More importantly, we're also going to talk about your book, which is coming out in September, and it's called The Confident Manager. So we're definitely going to just explore that, you being an author and launching a book soon, which is super exciting. I'd also like to talk to you about Motivational Maps, because you're one of only 7 senior experts at this, so that you can accredit others at Motivational Maps. I think it's such an important tool for the current day. I'd love to talk about that as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about all of that, Mark.
Fab. So leadership. Now, you've just won, congratulations, you just won Family Business of the Year 2026, which is a brilliant award, and you are a family-run business. So in the broadest sense, what's the difference between leading a tech company, which you used to do and took it to a 10 million management buyout, which is brilliant, and managing your own family business? What's the difference in leadership of those two businesses?
So if I take a step back in my role previously, then I joined a startup. My dad was one of the founders of that startup business. He and a colleague had a previous business with 2 other guys. They'd grown that 200 plus employees, big manufacturing facilities.
How old were you, Susannah, when you joined?
24, 23, something like that when I joined the second business. So the second business then, they took a lot of lessons from the first one. So they'd grown it, sold it. And it's what I call a non-family business. So as a non-family business, a lot of the attributes were there for me in terms of that loyalty, the nuances that come from the wider relationship, but without ever being able to use or say the word dad, and being scrupulously clean in terms of making sure there was no favoritism, there was no advantage with the relationship. And it made me more cautious, which is not necessarily a good thing. Because I really had to check that actually I was doing everything properly, everything cleanly. Pros and cons, but it taught me to be very professional. It taught me to be very, very mindful of the confidentiality of the various conversations that we would have at various levels in the organization, and then how we would then bring that home and have conversations around the dinner table as well. And my husband,
how did you find your niche though, Susannah? That's what's in my mind. You joined the business as a young woman. How did you find your niche in terms of functional niche? What was was it a passion that you said, right, I want to do this, or was it circumstance that said, we've got a gap here?
It was literally going, I was just helping them out. I just started helping them out. I left university, did a degree in ergonomics, so that very much man-machine kind of interface.
Fascinating, yeah.
On kind of the problem solving. Did a master's in IT, and then went, and now what do I do? And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I knew I loved kind of organizing things. I love problem solving. And I just literally started helping out. And then was there for 16 years, and everything that the engineers, in a sense, weren't doing, and the salesperson wasn't doing, I just picked it up and went, well, who's doing this bit? So from the admin into, as you say, the finance, and then the IT into all of the HR, eventually all the commercial contracts, and then every business development and business improvement project. I also was extremely lucky to be able to just get my hands into everything, and then found my passion, and it turned out my passion is kind of building businesses, almost productizing, systemizing, enabling other people to succeed, making things efficient and effective. So it's quite broad, and I think that's what I've always found quite challenging in terms of going. If I was in one very small niche, I would find it very challenging not to break out into other niches. Whereas in the role, especially with finance, you can kind of get involved in any area of the business.
There's a lovely point here that's triggering as I listen around, and most people suffer, in fact, any human would suffer from some sort of imposter syndrome. You don't seem to, and you certainly don't in that career progression that says, here's the problem, I think the solution needs to be here. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to lead that in some way because it needs leading. That's wonderfully logical. Most people go, oh, I've never done any HR stuff, so I can't possibly be the HR lead here. So how do you do that? How do you have the confidence to say, let me sort this, whether it's from experience or just the need to solve? How do you do that?
So I think there was an element of, I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew that I liked organizing things. You and I were talking about this kind of love of books, a love of excellence as well. So I would read a lot, research a lot, go in and I would model it from trying to look at best practice elsewhere. So I was very interested in the manufacturing advisory service, going out and looking at best practice elsewhere. What are they doing? What does it look like? What's the communication look like? All sorts of things. How are they organizing themselves? I was very fortunate because the founders had a previous business, and so they knew what good looked like themselves, and they had professional setup in terms of they had the accountants on board early. I was able to access the accountants to learn by asking questions, by doing. We were audited every year because they felt it was best business practice, and therefore every audit I would learn what I had missed and I would incorporate it back into the systems and then build the systems. I remember reading the E-Myth Revisited when we were skiing one year, and of course that's all about the entrepreneurial myth that people are entrepreneurs. They're not, they're just good technicians, and then they have to learn to do everything else, but it's very much about capturing best practice and then popping that into systems. And then we built all the ISO standards of quality, health and safety and environmental into our business operating system, and that was our ISO standard system.
So I'm getting, thank you. I'm definitely getting a Susannah DNA then. It's in whatever situation in business, you see a problem that needs to be solved and you go, right, I need to solve that. I might need to research how, because I don't have the expertise or the experience to do that yet, but I'm going to research it, learn it, and then I'm going to fix it. And I'm not just going to fix it for the moment. I'm going to put in processes, ISO, etc., to make sure it doesn't happen again. So there's a real rigor at the back end that started at there's a problem that needs solving, and I'm going to fix it for the long term. So there's the DNA, which I love. Tell me a little bit about your business now. And I love the name of this business, Aspirin Business Solutions. Why Aspirin?
Aspirin, because of all the headaches I had trying to figure out everything myself and not knowing what good looked like. And not just technically, but you talked about imposter syndrome, and there definitely was some, we didn't call it imposter syndrome back then. There was some degree of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what good looks like. I'm not sure that I can say that I don't know what I'm doing. I was also the only female leader, manager in the organization. So there was a whole lot of, when we were surrounded by experts, of feeling that need very much to actually become an expert yourself. And when you don't have a role model to follow, you follow the role models, you follow what you can see. So trying to find my own style within that, I think was challenging, and trying to kind of balance that kind of femininity with the masculine approach and going, what is my style? What is my approach? How do I want to manage people? How do I want to involve people? Is it more of a come in and be an expert and tell, or is it ask and be curious? And certainly, there was um, this is when I also had my children. In those days, you didn't have a lot of maternity leave. You had the statutory pay, and that was it, back in. But during that period of time, I was going to come in once a month and actually do all of the financials. And I remember going for my appraisal, and I wanted a very modest pay rise of £1,000, and I was told, no, you can't expect favoritism because of the family connection. So I, and every now and again you get those moments of clarity when you say exactly the right thing, and you go, where does that come from? But I just said, okay, well, in that case, I'm not allowed legally to actually come into the business because you weren't allowed to do that at the time. So I can't come into the business and actually do the accounts every single month. But again, that's the family thing. So I respect where you are. They then had to bring professionals in to do what I was doing. And at that point, they realised how expensive it would be to replace me.
How much value you were actually bringing.
Because when it's just there and it's being done and you have no benchmark, how do you value it? So I was then promoted whilst I was then on maternity leave and given a significant pay rise, like 40% pay rise, something that it was huge. And then when I came in, that's when I had imposter syndrome, because I thought I had to be this person. I didn't recognise I'd already earned the pay rise, the promotion, and I thought I had to be this person. I had to distinguish myself through a gap, through authority, through a style. And again, it's not who I wanted to be, but I didn't know how else to do it.
So Business Now, it's a wonderfully successful business, Family Business of the Year. Congratulations again on that. Brilliant. How's that different? Because it is your business. You're the founder of the business, and your husband Heath is involved in the business in terms of, he's head of Happy, which I just love that as a title. And your son is head of digital. Yes. So it's a brilliant family business. How's that different now? What's the difference in leading a business which is completely family owned?
The difference now is not how it started, because when it started, it was just me, and then Heath joined, and then Kyle has always kind of helped, from being 14, doing bits and pieces. But when he graduated during COVID, I just said, well, just come and join us temporarily, stay safe. And actually, we quickly realised how valuable his skills were. And then we took a decision to actually build a business around his digital skills, i.e. creating a reliance on his capability, which would mean that if he ever left, we would need to replace it. So the difference with this business is it now is very much about the family, in terms of, in a way, it doesn't matter what we do as long as we do it together. Because
that is magical, isn't it? When you've got very different competencies, they complement each other, and obviously you share the same passion for the business. So I'm going to pivot into Motivational Maps, and there's a really strong reason for this, because a number of people watching this podcast won't even have heard of that, Motivational Maps. I had the great pleasure, one of your senior colleagues in Motivational Maps, Kate Turner, trained me in Motivational Maps. So she did my own, and massively valuable for me as a manager and leader. Tell us a little bit about it as if we know nothing. What is Motivational Maps?
So Motivational Maps is a tool that I wish I had when I was a leader and a manager, because it tells people what actually motivates them and how motivated they are. So it's what we call MAPS motivation. So it gives us the language and it gives us the metrics. As a former finance director, I like that tangibility and I like the numbers, because the numbers can make sense to me and that it's something we can discuss. So when I was a leader and manager before, I didn't know. I knew my team were performing. I could tell that. I had all the measures and metrics, the accountability around that, especially with the finance, with the quality assurance, because I would manage people who weren't in my department as well. But I didn't know if they were happy. When people are focused, they don't always look happy. And so my concern then was around, actually, are they thriving? Are they going to stay? Are they actually enjoying their work? And because I was inexperienced, because I was uncomfortable around asking questions, I wanted some other kind of measure. I didn't have it at that time. So when I moved to Bournemouth 15, 16 years ago, I met the founder of Motivational Maps, and then very quickly went, okay, this is the tool that I want, because it just makes sense to me. So Kate, I know extremely well, and she
She's
and I
brilliant.
are amongst the 7 senior practitioners globally. And we work closely together in terms of not only sharing best practice, but also working with the founders to continually develop and innovate the products as well. And so there are 9 different motivators. And there are different tools that go into formulating the motivator. So it's built on now 30 plus years of research and knowledge and rigor. For me, it's part of its beauty is also part of why it's confusing, because it can be used for so many different things. So primarily, I would use it for coaching. I would
Yeah,
use it
self-development,
for
isn't it? Kate
it's
coached
self-development,
me
right?
against my motivators. It's brilliant as a coaching tool.
It's incredible as a coaching tool, because what you're starting off with is a level of self-awareness where you're helping the other person become self-aware through this lens of motivation. And it's very compatible with other tools like the personality profiles, like the
Yeah.
insights that you're very familiar with. So it's just like looking at the individual through a different lens and helping them see themselves in a different way. And so it's very much about what are their needs and their wants from work, what's most important to them, and what are the things that give them energy, and what are the things that drain their energy. And of course, even without knowing what they are, we are making decisions every day. We're making big decisions in terms of our careers, but also small decisions in terms of where we put our time and our effort based on the things that energize us and that we're interested in. And that's what we call our motivators. And there are also things that we are avoiding. So the most typical 2 motivators out of the 9, the most typical 2 motivators that we avoid are called director and star. Director is actually about taking responsibility and having authority for other people, for decision making. And that is true for leaders and for managers. So for the vast majority of leaders and managers, they are not motivated by the position of actually hierarchy, of responsibility, of authority, of making decisions that affect other people. So that's very, very important in terms of how it influences their style, and whether it's more of an avoid style and then wanting to abdicate rather than delegate, and to not manage people. And we can wrap it up in all sorts of ways, which are absolutely true in terms of caring and not wanting to micromanage, etc. But there's also the research which shows, and I know from having done, I don't know, maybe 1,000 of these, that actually most of our management and leadership style is based on who we don't want to be, rather than who
That's
we
fascinating.
actually want to be. So what are we avoiding being, as opposed to what's the style that we're embracing?
This
The
is
other one
so
that's very
poignant.
close to line is star, which is about
Yeah.
visibility, which is also so important for leadership. You can't follow someone you can't see.
This is hugely poignant just listening to you again, because it's triggering so many responses in my brain. A self-response about how do I lead naturally, and therefore what do I avoid, which is a really fascinating point. Another thing that I've learned through Ali Stewart, a great mutual friend and brilliant author herself, is the balance of challenge and support as a leader. How challenging are you by nature, and how supportive, and high performance. You need to bring a balance of both. That's the core idea. And I avoid, not always, but I think when I'm not conscious, I avoid challenge of people. I prefer to be supportive and positive. Give me feedback. Oh, everything's great. Keep it up. That the natural instinct to be supportive and positive far outweighs the challenging. But if I want to develop the people that I care about or in my team, I've got to dial up challenge. I can't avoid it because it feels a bit uncomfortable. That's the core point.
Yes. And as you and I know, if we can shift the belief then the behavior follows. So when we can change our belief around actually what's happening when we are over supporting people. So are we being kind? Potentially, but we're maybe setting people up for failure, for having dependency, for not being able to actually have confidence in their own capability and their decision making. So is that kind? Whereas, what's wrong with sweating? What's wrong with actually trying things? And it's very important that we develop a tolerance for mistakes as individuals, as managers. Now, these are managed mistakes, these are anticipated mistakes. And because if we don't stretch people, how do we know where their strengths are, where their talents are, where their motivators are? And then it's about where we then balance the support to be able to actually anticipate this. So they're expecting it, we're expecting it, and with them we can meet them where they are in terms of then catching them and supporting them. So if you think about it in terms like a personal trainer, if you were going to a personal trainer, it's because you want to actually be stretched beyond your current capability. And you would absolutely be expecting them to do the same thing. And the same with a coach.
Yeah, do you know,
How
the
much?
other thing that triggered, and we're talking motivational maps, and I'm loving
Mhm.
this because it is I can feel all the synapses connecting again around motivational maps. One of my sons worked and lived in LA for 8 years and was working in a recruitment company, and it was a lovely small business that was growing, and I think they had 12 people in the office. So there's a lovely small office that it was a great family environment. His main motivator, and the 9 motivators are clustered into 3 key buckets, I call them, and they are achievement, growth, relationship. Now, James is relationship driven, and he has a high yellow energy, to use insights, which means he's very social, very gregarious. The business about 2 years ago decided, you know what, we don't really need an office. Recruitment, you can do it on the phones from home. So we're closing the office and you're all going to be home-based. And initially James said, oh, great, that means that, more free time. I can travel more and do work from different parts of the world, which conceptually sounds great. But he's relationship driven, and therefore he's sitting in front of a computer every day with no one else in the room. And so suddenly that relationship's taken away, and very quickly started to say to me, I'm not enjoying my job anymore. I don't know what it is. I've been enjoying it for years. And suddenly it's no fun anymore. Well, there you go. Relationship driven.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you drill down into exactly which of the motivators then are his highest, because typically we have 3 of those 9 which are most important to us, and they have their own kind of special blend in the way that they would interact, and potentially also with the lowest one as well. And there's very much something around that relationships where it's about that interaction with people. And yes, he's still getting that. But when you think about recruitment, it's a very cyclical kind of market in terms of it's very up and very down, and actually you can get a lot of no's and a lot of frustrations, and you need people around you to be able to just bounce that off and also celebrate your successes. It's kind of like, have I won if there's no one else to kind of celebrate that? So have we achieved something?
Exactly right. Now, wonderfully, it's a great segue now, because the book you've written, which is being launched in September, which means, as I've got experience of writing a book, the book's ready, but you're just getting all the ducks in the row and thinking about launch and marketing and goodness knows what else. It's called The Confident Manager. And I'm sure what we've already talked about is going to be integral into that, in terms of how do you lead, how do you manage, how do you adapt, how do you avoid, plus motivational maps. Can we start by learning from you, what was the inspiration to write your book in the first place?
It maybe goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is actually I love to problem solve and then capture it and then pop it into a system or something where people can actually then pick it up and learn from it. So for me, it's always been important to help other people, to help people to grow, to develop. That was always the most satisfying part of my role, when you see people grow beyond what they thought they could do and be very confident and successful
I'm the
people in
same,
their
by the
own
way. It's the
right.
biggest motivator. See others come out of their shell, achieve, overcome. Yeah, it is
And with any
massively
kind of
motivating.
legacy, it's that, isn't it? Because actually,
Yeah, yeah.
each one help one, and how do we actually create a better society, a stronger society, and where people are happy, people are kind. This is where we kind of have our little ripple effect in the world. And if enough of us have that kind of ripple effect, then not only are we putting positivity out and we feel making a difference, and that energizes us, but maybe it has some kind of lasting effect as well. So there was something there about capturing my knowledge and being able to share that knowledge to enable other people to succeed. I think that beyond the business, as I say, there's something about the whole of society. What if could we look at employee engagement now? It's the lowest. It's been 20%, I believe, is now the latest Gallup survey.
Yeah, it is.
We've been working on employee engagement for 20 plus years, and yet the numbers are getting worse. Engagement of managers is also shockingly low. And so if our managers aren't engaged and kind of feeling it, then how can they possibly infuse the people with confidence and enthusiasm and certainty to be able to try new things, to stretch themselves? So, and if we don't have this strong internal force from our self-belief and our concepts and our energy, we're then very much subject to external forces and the pressures, and that, whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's actually depression, that does not lead to a healthy, happy world. So I guess there's a whole lot of kind of purpose behind it, as well as I've just always wanted to from a child. I love books and always had that idea that one day, I'd write a book. It just proved to be a lot more difficult than I anticipated it would do.
Take me through that, because I know exactly from having done that myself, where you go, I want to write a book, and I have for a while, and you go, let's start. And then even if there were no other distractions about leading a business as you do, and a family and all those other things, it's still not easy. So give a flavour, and there will be plenty of people listening and watching who would like to write a book and haven't. Give us a flavour of that journey and why it wasn't as easy as you first thought it might be.
So you and I have got a number of decades of experience behind us. So we have a whole load of knowledge. And it's a case of going, actually, which of this knowledge is most important and relevant to our audience? Because if no one picks up the book, what's the point? It's not for my self-gratification. It's actually about the difference it makes in the world. But how do we know what people want? So for me, that's always a challenge. And then it's a case of going, and how do I now convey this in a way that is simplistic enough that people can just pick it up without, as you say, we're juggling a lot of things. We don't want to add more noise over here. We actually want something that creates clarity, something that's enjoyable, something that's easy, but also intriguing. And so I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and create something that I felt, because I think when it's good. Yeah. That I felt it was a good book and something that's representative, not just representative of me, but something that I'm proud of as a piece of work. And of course, me, I do the research. I looked at different ways of doing it, and I looked at the structure, and I started using that. But then I quickly ended up going into 60,000 words and going, I don't even know what I have written anymore.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? It becomes a little bit of a stream of consciousness, and 60,000 is a lot.
Too much.
It's a lot.
Way too much. This is about 24,000, the current book now. Because as you say, it becomes a stream of consciousness, because then you're trying to sift out actually what is relevant, what's not relevant, what do I think is important versus actually what the reader think is actually useful to them. And then trying to create it into a format. Originally, I was trying to layer it up so you could build knowledge, and then it would all make sense at the end. But then I thought, well, people would probably never get to the end. There's lots of books that I've never got to the end. So how do I do it? So I ended up having to sit with it for a long time and then come back to it and play with it. I had to have a detox of other people's books, because it was just adding more ideas and more knowledge and more information that I had to just go, stop. And the way I did it was on holiday. So having our own family business, we can go away.
And space too. So plenty of time to think and write.
And then we've got a VW camper van, a T5. So we will drive, my husband enjoys the driving. I will then write, while we're driving down to
Oh,
Italy or down to
fascinating.
Portugal, and that helped enormously. And then eventually, what I've done is structured it around 7 questions, and therefore each chapter, each question is an answer in itself. So it sets up what the challenge is. For example, how do
So I
I
could
give
read
feedback?
one chapter, put
Yes,
the book down, and then you'd read another one in a month, and there would still be
exactly
value. It
that.
doesn't have to go all the way through.
Exactly that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes. Yes.
I
Because
like
we're
that.
busy. We're
Yeah.
busy. So you can just read one chapter, get a few ideas, just start to try. And I very much encourage people just to try something. Otherwise, it's just more knowledge sat on the shelf getting dusty. What's the point in that? Just try one thing and then go from there. And if you like that, if it starts to work from you, then come back, do something else. If it doesn't, ask some questions. And just get curious about what it is and what's working, what's not working. And I'm very, very much led by curiosity now, which I think is
Mm.
the flip side to the imposter syndrome. We're going, actually, we now know we don't need to know everything. And actually there's a real beauty in not knowing everything, because it makes us appreciate other people's expertise and other people's opinions far more, which is very, very motivating, because everyone wants to feel heard, everyone wants to feel valued. Everyone wants to feel they have a bit of agency, that they're having a bit of um, an ability to be able to make a difference. So actually, even if we do know the answer, it's very beneficial for us to have a framework, have a structure, but actually ask the questions and encourage people to actually consider it, be curious themselves, and that creates buy-in, which is enormously helpful, of course, in terms of change as well.
I love this because I'm getting a real flavour that you captured lots and lots of thoughts and knowledge, and it got to 60,000 words, and then you found a way to simplify, and it's 7 questions. Where did the 7 questions come from? Obviously, it's from that mass, but specifically, how did you come up with those 7 questions?
Um, I like the number 7. Big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits
Oh,
of,
yeah, yeah.
highly effective people.
So did you say to yourself, I'm going to have 7? You think, I'm going to use questions as my frame and my red thread, and I like 7, and it's going to be 7. Was that a conscious decision?
You know me, like I have my bit of research, and very early on in my ergonomics, we did an experiment around this number of 7 plus or minus 2. So we
Yeah.
know that people can literally see 7 bits of data in a blink, plus or minus 2, depending on the individual and the complexity of it. So 7's a good number.
I think it is. I think it is. So give us a flavour for those 7 questions. You don't have to tell us all of them, but give us a bit
Yep.
of a flavour, make us want more.
I really wanted to be able to address what are the big kind of topics. So the first one is going, what am I actually supposed to be doing now that I'm a manager? We know that 82%
What does
of
good look
people...
like? You said earlier,
What
Susannah.
does good look like is so important. So important. How can you possibly succeed and feel confident and know we're actually achieving anything unless we actually know what good looks like? So I think about it in terms of like football. If you don't know how to score a goal, if you can't see the goal, if you don't know, well, what does crossing the line actually mean? And if we in a business, we often change the goalposts. That's quite a challenge. And we change the goalposts without telling people, and that sets people up for failure and disappointment as well. So
Well,
it's one
as
of the
fellow
biggest
coaches
differences.
in business, Susannah, one of the questions we always ask fairly early on, when someone says, Bob's not doing a very good job, you go, well, is he clear what his job is? Is he clear
Yeah,
what is expected of him? And usually the answer is, well, I think so. And then you go and ask Bob, and he goes, well, I've no idea. Or he says something different to what the manager said. That's nearly always the root cause. There isn't clarity of what is expected of me. So that's a great start. Great question.
exactly.
Give us
And
some others,
behavioural,
Susannah.
okay? So when you're
Yeah,
saying you're not sure if he's doing a good job, in behavioural terms, specifically, what is it he's doing and not doing that is different to what you expect?
yeah. And
And
what's he
then you can
avoiding?
go in check. Yeah,
What's he avoiding?
you know,
Um,
and
what else? What
potentially,
other questions do you have?
so how do I motivate people? Of course, how do I motivate different people in different roles? So I talk about kind of not just how to motivate, but how to avoid demotivating. Because there's lots of things that we do inadvertently, and
Oh,
the lack
gosh.
of
Yeah.
clarity is one of those things. So in order to kind of be kind and not spoon feed people, we avoid giving that detailed, explicit clarity that is so important. How do I give feedback without making things worse? How do I develop people without micromanaging them?
Yeah.
Why don't people just do what I need them to do? So a lot about kind of self-awareness,
Yeah.
self-regulation, because, if we're not in a good place, our frustration, um, our kind of busyness leaks into our body language, into our conversation, and we're already setting off on the wrong foot, because people remember, come back to that kind of Maya Angelou quotation around people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was really emphasized to me because my dad, who, as you know, I was incredibly fortunate to work with for 16 plus years, and kind of see him at his very best in the workplace. And my dad has won awards. He has the Freedom of the City of London. He has awards from what he did he has actually in wastewater, so in sewage treatment. He has awards for the work that he did and the innovations that he helped create. But unfortunately he had Alzheimer's. And one of the things that when the doctor came to give us the diagnosis, he said, people with Alzheimer's might not remember the words and what you're saying, but it's all about how you make them feel.
Mm. Yeah.
And so it
Fascinating.
just emphasised that bit around going. And if we think about that as a manager, how do we want someone to feel is how I would lead with whatever I'm trying to do. Hence the book. How do I want someone to feel when I'm actually when they're reading this book, and if I'm facilitating something, if I'm giving feedback, let's start with how you want them to feel, and presumably you want them to feel clear, supported.
Yeah. Yeah.
They know the way forward. They know that actually you're on the same side, even if you're holding to account, even if you're having a difficult conversation. And I say difficult, or sometimes I use the word negative because that's how it's perceived rather than what it's intended to be. But people need to have clarity, even if they're uncomfortable. And there's nothing wrong with discomfort. And as I say, in the same way of being challenged, there's nothing wrong with discomfort as long as people feel that actually you believe in them, you trust them, and that you want them to succeed.
It's a horrible question to ask, or it's a difficult one to answer, given where you're at with the book, which is just about there, isn't it? What are you most proud of on reflection?
From the book,
Mm.
or just haven't got it done and out of my head.
I've wanted to, and I've wanted what I loved about what you said earlier is you want to make it an easy read, so that it's understandable and pretty straightforward. So people read it, they go, yeah, I get what you're trying to say, but it also has to have substance. If it's just too simple, well, I kind of knew that already. You got to give me something that I didn't know, or I definitely needed reminding of, and you've
Yes.
just done it. How did you strike that balance between super clear and simple and substantial?
It's based on I've been now running my business full time for 16 years, a couple of years part time before that. And as you can imagine, when I started my own business, so basically we did a management buyout. I decided not to be an ongoing shareholder. My passion was in building the business, not in the technology of the business. Um, I was going to go and do teaching and was offered a place to go and do that. So I think education, coaching, mentoring, facilitating, they're all very similar, right? Developing people. And then my colleague said, stay, see us through the actual handover post management buyout, work part-time, write your own job description, and set your own business on the side, which is just the most
Nice
incredible.
segue.
Oh, beautiful. So I was able to do that for a couple of years, and then we moved down south 200 miles. I didn't realise, and again, this is something wonderful about going. I'm glad I didn't know how difficult it was going to be, because if I had, I think I would have chickened out and not done it. But I moved 200 miles to the south in the middle of a recession,
Why?
2010
What
going.
was the driver to move? I mean, Bournemouth's a wonderful part of the world. Why did you say, right, we're moving a long way and we're going a long way south? What was the reason?
Mum and Dad had a place down here. We would come down and visit. And what I remember one year is walking along the beach going, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to live here? And then I realised I've been saying it every single year. So I
Yeah,
had to
bingo.
stop and listen to myself. At the time, I was doing my coaching qualification, and we had to do 6 coaching sessions with another coach. And so I asked him to coach me around moving to Poole. So it felt very, very safe. So one was around school, one was around house, one was around friendships, one was around work, etc. And at the end of it, as part of that, we discovered then that the timing was right for grammar school. It was coming up to my 40th, and I wanted to make that move before I was 40. It felt like I always use my birthdays, and especially milestones birthdays, as an opportunity to go, right, next chapter. And to, so it's a very positive thing for me, the next milestone.
And
And
Bournemouth,
then
marvellous place. The beach,
stunning.
gloriously sandy, huge beach. It's a fabulous part of the world. So I get the drive to go. I get the drive to go there.
And there's a mindset. So most people down here that we meet have moved either from London or the Midlands, and they're people who have literally disrupted their lives like us to make a different choice. And when you're around people who actually have done that, there's a mindset where it's all doable. Of course you can, and there's a bit more kind of collaboration, etc. So you're resetting the norm, and I wanted to reset the norm for our children as well.
Yeah, big shout out to Bournemouth Rugby Club. So I'm a big fan of Bournemouth Rugby Club, James Croker and the whole team there. Fabulous setup, brilliant community centre. Bournemouth Rugby Club, big shout out for that. And it's a good reason to go to Bournemouth for me regularly next season. Can't wait. So let's get back to your book, The Confident Manager. I've read it. So I read all 7 of those questions and I answer them for myself. What do you hope I do once I've read it? So I become an alumni of your book, as it were. What do you want it to inspire in your reader once they've completed it?
For me, chapter 1, which is the bit around what am I supposed to do now I'm a manager, goes back to that piece around wanting people to be motivated to be managers, to believe in the value of being a manager. Because if most of us are working from and away from and avoidance, then there's a lot of talented people with, I always say our clients are ambitious and big-hearted. So they're ambitious because and often work in highly regulated industries as well. So charities, social housing, law firms, etc. So they're ambitious because customer service, customer experience is very important to them. The quality standards are very, very important to them. But they're big-hearted because actually they care not just about their customers, but about their team. They're a bit too kind, maybe a bit too vague, not holding people to account, delaying rather than giving feedback just in time. This is something that I encourage. And so that can mean there are amazing people out there who are avoiding or delaying or hesitating about becoming really effective managers. And what I say is, if not you, who? If not you, who? So we do that Cartesian coordinates exercise that you might be familiar with,
Yes.
So what would happen if I do, what would happen if I don't, etc. So to really help people to understand what is the impact, not just for them and for their team and the organisation, and and then you can carry on and carry on and carry on, can't you, actually, because you become a leader in your own life. And so the whole point is that for me, it's all about relationship building. Everything I talk about is relationship building. Feedback is about relationship building. You and I are giving feedback all the time to everyone that we meet, all the time, and so it's not about performance management. Yes, it is in terms of work, but it's much more about that. It's about how the reason why we won the Family Business Award, and I can sit here with integrity and be really proud of that, is because we walk our talk, and we have put this into place. Especially me, you can imagine it's not been easy for my family, my husband especially, that I put it into place. So we have these difficult conversations. We push past that barrier around it being uncomfortable, about feeling judged, about feeling that we're going to get into conflict, to go, so let's do it. We're very lucky. We're married 30 years. We can lean on the relationship and say, if we intend to be married in another 10 years, then let's have the argument now and let's debate it out. And I will say to them, challenge me, because I'm not always right, and I'm over ambitious. So what I'd want for them is to actually really be more motivated to lead, to manage in all areas of their life and to feel more confident, more authentic, and to actually believe that they are making a difference by doing it in a way that they can stand behind, as opposed to these external forces, people who have different styles, different approaches, different values, doing it, and then becoming diminished and less than we are capable of, and than the world deserves.
Yeah, I love that. I'm getting a really strong flavor that the Confident Manager is a brilliant textbook for anyone who wants to be a manager or who has just become one. How do I do it? What does good look like? There it is in your wonderful book. I've got one last question. It's about being an author. It's, what's your top tip for anyone who's listening or watching who's thinking, do you know what, it is time now for me to write a book? What would you say is your top tip from having gone through that experience?
Um, I think take your time and explore the process of writing. So what I did recently was go to a literary festival, and the only talk I could get into because of my diary was one on psychological thrillers, which are my least favorite um, genre. But what I did was ask a question around how the author structured the book. How
Yeah,
does she
that's
create
it.
the timeline from the start to the finish? 'Cause that was my struggle, was how do I create it? Because I know you can do a model, and I created about 8 different models and then went, "No, they're all wrong. They don't fit, they don't feel right. I've forced a narrative around this model." So I would just get curious about the process of writing very early on, and then just let it evolve, you know. So I think you have to find your own style. As you know, mine is quite methodical in my kind of style. There is a process. People have book coaches. Go and talk to people, go and talk to other authors, ask lots of questions, and then almost get to the point where you can't not write, you know, and then give yourself time.
Yeah, it's great advice. I mean, I got lucky because I I was given that by my publisher. So I decided not to self-publish because my two older brothers have done that. They self-published and they said, don't self-publish. And I got a publisher, Brenda Dempsey, who's just brilliant at giving me, here's the structure, here's the process, here's a little bit of encouragement. So that was the easy way out. You absolutely can do it yourself. I think it's brilliant advice you give in how to do that. Investigate, research, find a process, give yourself space and time, and then go for it, really, is what we're saying, isn't it? Why not?
And then, and as you said, I've chosen to self-publish because of the constraints and the timelines and everything else. And I just needed, you know, I have this independent. I'm motivated by freedom.
I get that feeling.
I
I get that
exactly.
feeling.
You know, but the freedom not just for flexibility. This is why people can misunderstand the motivation around freedom, and not just for flexibility, but it's actually the freedom to be able to innovate in different ways and explore and be curious,
And
etc.
solve, right? You're a
Yeah,
problem
and
solver. That was a
problem
problem
solve.
to solve, and you researched and found out the way, and you've solved it. So
Exactly.
you've
And
lived
so it's
that
also
freedom.
the ecosystem around the book, you know. So as you say, yeah, the book is now done. I'm now writing my own summary so I can remember what I said. It's got the beautiful models. One of the things you asked me about was the substance versus the flow. That's
Yeah.
because it's built on all of my years of actually um, people development. So I'm a people development specialist as well as a coach. And so all of my years of people development have actually, which models have landed really well. How have I've created models that land well, that describe things like the difference between leadership and management, and made it a really simple, easy, memorable way of looking at it, and then be able to look at your own role to be able to go, okay, when am I leading? When do I need to manage? And where do I lean too far? Because our motivators are also around going, oh, hang on, I know that I want to do that, but is that the right way to be spending my time? So again, a bit of self-management around that piece. And then we're now creating the Conflict Manager Academy, which is actually bringing it to life at a 12-month development program, so that you can read the book, but equally the first 7 months are going to be, so it's a little bit, you know, like an hour or so every month, where it's going to be the first chapters, but then moving into what if it all does go wrong, and then bringing in experts as well to talk about what if there is a grievance, or, you know, something else. Because again, it's about the things that we're avoiding that make us be fearful around having more robust conversations, and also not knowing, you know, if we ask a question, we might not know the answer. So for me, I recognise in me that I don't want to ask the question because I don't know how to answer that. It's why I became a mental health first aider as well, because I realised that I was doing people an injustice, a disservice, by avoiding conversations that actually could make a massive difference to to them and to their lives as well. So there's a lot that you can do in an amazing way with the book, and it's again really kind of thinking about it as, is it just a lovely thing to do, or actually is it actually quite a project? And how do we actually create a project that we can enjoy and enjoy the process of? And like anything in work, there's going to be parts of it that we have to sweat over, we don't particularly enjoy. But overall, is it something that we can be accomplished with? And I'm getting very, very curious about dopamine. So it's also like that real interest now has a massive role in motivation. Very fascinated as the impact actually on things that antidepressants are now having on our ability to actually feel highs and lows. But equally is that you don't really get those highs that, you're talking about your son and that kind of real sense of achievement. We don't get that unless we actually have some discomfort, because one follows the other. It's why I love going for sea swimming now. When I go sea swimming, what I used to say was, this is the most challenging thing I'm going to do all day. After going in the cold water, everything else, every conversation I have after this is going to be easy compared to doing this. So it's having that confidence in yourself to challenge yourself, to trust yourself. I think it's important that you can know, like, and trust yourself. Otherwise, why would anybody else trust you? But this is the inner work that we do as coaches, right?
Yeah, totally. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Susannah Brade-Waring, for all of your insight, all of your advice, and to wish you amazing good luck with The Confident Manager when it's launched in September. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it, Mark. Good to talk with you.